Greetings and salutations, and welcome, old friends and new, to Truthseekers. Tonight, my friends, is a special event for us. Every once in a while, my friends, this webcam and this microphone give me a passport, a method for connecting with some incredible people. And tonight is one of those nights. I'm pleased and delighted to tell you that tonight we have a very special guest in the form of Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber, of course, is best known for his horror novels, which I grew up reading, both The Wolfen and The Hunger. I read growing up, and of course, for his seminal work, Cambian, a nonfiction account of his experiences with non-human entities. He has maintained actually a dual career of sorts as an author of fiction and also as an advocate for these paranormal concepts, alien experiencers. He has been a fixture in the UFO community and the world of aliens for decades now. Let's all welcome Mr. Whitley Strieber. Welcome, sir. Glad to have you here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm always glad to do these, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, and I thought we would start. Forgive me, but most of my audience here, I'm sure, is very familiar with your original account, and I'm sure most of my audience has read your book. It sold 2 million copies. It was a huge phenomenon at the time that it came out. I remember It was all over popular culture. It was on news shows and talk shows and radio programs. Everybody was talking about this book. I had to get it and read it and was sort of blown away by the whole experience that you had. But I wanted to ask you, given that, I don't know if you know this, but today is actually Christopher Walken's 79th birthday. And I've never heard you.
I thought it was his 179th.
But I've never heard you talk about it, and I wanted to know, what did it feel like when you found out first that they were going to make a movie about your incredible experiences, and then what did it feel like when you heard or knew that the person playing you in the movie was going to be the legendary Christopher Walken?
Well, I wanted Dan Aykroyd.
Really?
Yeah, and Dan Aykroyd wanted to do it too, but for whatever reason, we ended up with Christopher Walken. And he's a wonderful actor. I'd seen him only once before on the stage in Sweet Bird of Youth with Irene Worth at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And so I knew his acting abilities, and I got to know him a bit. It was quite a bit of fun to know him. He was a very articulate guy. He knew an awful lot about acting. He said a lot of fascinating things about it.
Well, that's interesting, and it is now an iconic movie. And interestingly, right before I got to speak to Mr. Strieber for the first time through email, I had just rewatched that movie off of a DVD at my cabin in the mountains because there's, so I thought it was interesting that right after I watched that movie again, I had seen it, in my younger years, but seeing it again, it holds up really well.
Yeah, it seems to have gotten better somehow. When I first saw it, I didn't care for it too much because I was too aware of all of the troubles that had gone into it. There were problems with the special effects and this and that and the usual stuff that happens. And
well, it was the 80s, no CGI, so they had to do all of those effects real.
So it was all physical, and there were a lot of problems. But now looking at it again, which I also did recently, because people kept telling me it was better than I remembered, and they were right. It is.
It's a great movie.
I have to tell you that Chris's idea of me being a completely self-obsessed narcissist is not quite true. I have no camera on me at all times.
Interesting.
But that was his idea, and I think they wanted to make a comedy, and they would have if I hadn't been there watching their every move.
Well, I also wanted to ask you, because these experiences when they first started happened decades ago, and I've never heard really your perspective on this, but I want to know, has the lens of time or your perception after all this time has passed, has your opinions of these entities, what their motivations or their goals were in contacting you, has that perspective for you changed over time?
The perspective has become more complex and deepened. There's been a long arc from the early days when I was really strung out much more than I understood that I was. I didn't really understand how much stress I had been under and how badly it had affected me. And that it took years. Oh, it was years before that began to change. And I went through a period of the 80s and into the 90s when I was do you hear what's that noise?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just tweeting the show out. I apologize. I should have muted
No,
my. No, go ahead.
So many electronic glitches happen when I'm on my show that I'm always concerned.
No, everything's fine for once.
Okay, well, anyway, the first few years, they kept coming back. And they kept coming back for the simple reason that I wanted them to, and I was trying to get them to come back. Because even though I was terrified, my curiosity was stronger than my fear. And I think it was, in retrospect, a little irresponsible because my wife and son were exposed to this, and there were some very dangerous things that happened, and clearly it was there were things that could go wrong. I mean, they weren't gods; they were trying to do something with us that they obviously didn't do very often, or if at all. And for example, one night I woke up because the house was very bright. This was in about 1992 or 3, I think. And it was filled with this sort of purple light. And I thought, good God, it looks like it's coming from downstairs. So I rushed down the hall, to the end of the hallway where there was a stairway that overlooked the living room, and looked across the stairway where the light was coming from. And there was this purple sort of plasma hanging in the air, about so big above the couch. And one of our cats, our oldest cat, a Burmese, was called Sadie, was crouched on the back of the couch, sort of moving toward it. And I thought, God, I'm going to get my camera. This was before cell phones. So I ran back to the bedroom and grabbed the camera, which I kept on the bedside table for obvious reasons, hoping to get a picture of something that would take me off the lunatic circuit and put me onto something more real. And but as I got back, there was a big purple flash, and then the light went out. I went down the hall, and both cats were curled up on the floor, like almost. And you couldn't wake them up or anything, and they were still alive. So I went back to bed, and the next morning, Sadie had purple tumors in both of her eyes, and she was in agony, and she had to be put down.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Wow.
This is not a game. And that wasn't done on purpose. I'm sure it was done. It happened because she touched her nose to it. She was curious and touched her nose to it, which also said to Anne, you're curious too, so don't touch your nose to anything else.
Wow.
But it was like that. I mean, there were a lot of things that happened that were right at the edge, or a little, in this case, up beyond the edge. So it was hard, and the amount of tension, the sheer tension that we were all three experiencing was very great. And in retrospect, I have thought to myself, maybe I should have put my family first before my curiosity and just turned away from this entirely. Because, I was a novelist as well. I had never written another book like this except Communion. it would have been forgotten, and I would have gone down another path. And
yeah, that leads me to one of my other questions that I had for you, because I started rereading the book, and I had recently watched the movie, and it seems like you took a turn at a pivotal point from fearing the experiences or trying to figure them out to actually embracing, even inviting them. And
yeah,
I would think for most people, these kind of experiences would be shocking and absolutely terrifying. But there is a part in the book and movie, I feel, where you seem to accept these experiences, and instead of you invited them, you went looking for them, right, to try to
right.
figure out what was happening.
Well, what basically happened is that the lady on the cover of Communion, I mean, I presume it's the same being, it could have been a different one, fell in love with us and with the family, and started practically living in the house. She was around all the time. And to give you an idea of what that was like, my son once brought, we used to have kids up to the house, and we had told all the parents, it wasn't a secret, that this was real and it was happening. And so we would go up to the house, and my son would have friends, and he had a friend up who, she would sort of half wake me up. You were never normal around her. It was not like, you never sat across a table from her and chatted. It was not like that. But you were definitely in an altered state. And I saw her beside the bed, and I couldn't move, but she had, let me backtrack a second. The boy had, as a child, a little child, they were about 8 or 9 at the 10 at this point, had stuck his tongue in a light socket, and he had a big scar on his mouth. And then suddenly there she is at the bedside with this smoke pouring out of her mouth, and she's making these very upset kind of tweeting noises and stuff. And then she went away and didn't come back. And I was used to her. I mean, she was around all the time. And finally, I just went back to sleep. But what I didn't know was she had been standing outside the bedroom, the boy's bedroom, with the door cracked open, and she had 3 long fingers that could move like snakes and had black claws on the end of them, and another shorter one, I guess, worked as an opposing thumb like this, and like it was like this, and but many knuckles. I mean, unless they were actually didn't even have bone in them, I don't know. So what she'd been doing was sticking 2 of these fingers in the door and scratching up and down the door and tapping on the door, because the guest bed was right across the hall from the bedroom from the door. My son's bedroom was off in the corner, so he didn't experience this. And when we got up in the morning, I didn't know this had happened. The boy said, "Mr. Strieber, these claws kept coming and scratching on the door all night." I said, "Oh, really?"
Wow.
He said, "Yeah." "Was that an alien?" I said, "Well, were you dreaming?" "No, sir," he said, "I was not dreaming."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, then maybe it was, because they do come around here. I told your folks about that." He said, "Mr. Strieber, I would like to go home now." And so
Wow.
we took him home. He never saw him again. That was the end of the relationship.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I would go back either. Mr. DB Cooper is in the live chat with a contribution to our show and says, "I always thought it was genius that you asked to smell them. I would have done the same." So can you tell me what
Yeah.
prompted you to smell them, and what do they
But,
smell like?
well, okay. They've smelled different ways, obviously. I've tried that more than once. And the reason is, I'm very aware of the more senses you engage, the more chance you have of having a coherent memory.
Yeah, the more senses, that's scientifically proven fact. The more
Right.
senses are involved in a memory, the greater the
So
strength of the memory.
I was seeing something, I was hearing it, I was being touched, and I wanted my sense of smell to also be engaged. And the night the one in December of '85, which I remembered quite. I mean, I was conscious during that experience. I wanted to smell. I said, "Let me smell your hand." And one of them had these big blue gloves on. He put his hand up against my nose, and it's, as I recall, it smelled sort of cinnamony and earthy, maybe a little bit of skin like. But another time, when these entities that were invisible were trying to meditate with me at the cabin, and I finally couldn't do it because you try meditating in a room full of invisible people who are almost, I mean, they're invisible, but you can hear them breathing and moving around. It's not like ghosts or anything.
Yeah, that's a
It's going to
bizarre
be hard to
experience. Yeah.
do. So I said, the first night they showed up, I said, "Look, I can't see you, but I know perfectly well you're in the room. And I am going to leave the room if I can't see you, because there's no point in me staying here. I can't meditate like this." So nothing happened. And I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to bed." And I went to bed. And in the middle of the night, there came a bang, bang on my shoulder, which was very familiar. They would pop on my shoulder when they wanted me to wake up in those days. We were really very close to them at that cabin. And so what I see is, sitting on the foot of the bed is a man, a perfectly ordinary man, although he's wearing a tunic, not our kind of clothing. And he's very still. He's sitting with his back against the footboard, very still. And I think to myself, he's doing it. Whoever was in there is showing me what he looks like. So I go down to the foot of the bed, and I'm like this far from him. I'm like looking right at him. I can see his face. It's it would look like it was a human face. Let me put it that way. And his hands are lying on his knees. And so, okay, I can see, I can't hear anything. There's no touch. I don't know how I can generate anything involving my hearing. I said hello, but he was just totally still and silent. So I took his hand. Therefore, I'm now engaging touch as well. And I smelled the back of his hand, lifted it to my nose, and smelled it to try to smell his skin. And the guy's skin was ripe. I mean, this was not somebody who'd bathed any time recently, if it ever. And it shocked me that he stank so badly.
Oh, wow. So this one stunk.
I dropped his hand, and he immediately just disappeared. And I think it was because it was taking him from whatever he was or wherever he was from. It was taking a lot of concentration to remain visible in our sphere of reality. And when I did that suddenly, it broke his concentration and he was gone. But wow. Those are two instances, and both times the sense of smell did help. That said, temporal lobe epilepsy is characterized by strong sense and odors are part of the temporal lobe hallucinatory spectrum. However, I had already been so carefully tested for this illness, which was during the period of time I was trying to explain this away. I did not want to conclude that I'd been diddled with by goddamn aliens. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's a little hard to take. Yeah.
What just happened? I wasn't in this whole crazy world at all. So that was one of the first tests I ran on myself. I got a doctor, obviously, as a neurologist, to run it. And I was not only did I not have temporal lobe epilepsy, I had an exceptionally stable brain that could stand up to a lot of challenge, because the way the test works is they put leads up your nose so that they can get electrical signals directly from the temporal lobe, and then they challenge your mind, your brain, with different types of flashing light. And my brain remained stable through the whole challenge. So it was obviously not that was not my illness, not my issue. And I already knew that when this happened.
Yeah, Dorothy Hawkins is here and says, "Thanks for paving the way for experiencers, Mr. Strieber. Communion opens so many eyes." And then we had a question from Annie Kurtz. Did you have any emotions that you recall during the encounters? Examples: love, hate, gratitude, fear.
All of the above and
I was going to say that. Yeah.
the December 1985 experience was terrifying. And I'd been scared of this for a long time before. I think they started coming in the summer before that, because that was when I became obsessed with getting a shotgun. I was marching around the house with a shotgun. I had an alarm system installed. I got a pistol. I mean, I'm a Texan. The Texan feels threatened. He's going to.
Yeah, you're going to shoot those aliens, right?
I mean, that's my first thought. And it wasn't just any shotgun. It was a Benelli riot gun. It was a big old mother, a big 8-shot riot gun that I had loaded with slugs, and I knew how to shoot a shotgun with slugs in it very effectively. I could have disabled a car with that shotgun very easily.
Yeah, that's a big gun. Yeah,
it's a big gun, and so that was definitely there. And then in October, what happened in the summer is I would have these nights, these very disturbed nights, and then during the day I would have horrible headaches, and the headaches were from pushing away what was happening in the night and refusing to face it. Then finally it comes in October. There are other witnesses. Annie Gottlieb and Jacques Sandalescu are there, and they have experiences too, and me and Anne and our boy did as well. So, then it's sort of coming to the surface. At that point, I know there's something weird going on. All right.
I think so. Yeah.
Then December comes and it bursts out into my consciousness. I'm beat up. I've been screwed in the butt. I've had a needle go in my head. And so I know that something has happened to me in December. My first thought is that I've been screwed with, because of, I'm an author, and there's always some nut who doesn't like something you write.
Yeah.
And so I thought that somebody had gotten into the house and screwed with me in the night, and that I had not, that was, and so I viewed it at first as a crime, and only after, I guess it was late February, early March, when I finally faced the fact that it had to have been a real experience.
Wow. I wanted to ask you about one of the tantalizing things about your story and many other experiencers' story seems to be the lack of physical evidence. And it makes me wonder, were these real physical experiences, or perhaps this is all some mental phenomenon and not physical? But in your book, Solving the Communion Enigma, you wrote, quote, "Later that day, I noticed a sore lump at the top of my left ear. From time to time, the ear would get red and hot. And then you went to a doctor who diagnosed a probably benign cyst that was fixed in the pinna of the ear, close to the top."
The top part.
So I wanted to ask, do you still feel like that's an alien implant in your ear?
I don't know if it's an alien implant. I know I saw it. I saw the people come into the room who put it in, and they were two human beings, a man and a woman. So that's pretty straightforward. I mean, they were, I couldn't stop them. I tried to.
Have you had a doctor try to remove it, or somebody to study it? Because I know you knew Roger Lear and did a book with him as well.
I did have a doctor try to remove it. The video's on my website, and
oh, interesting. I did not know that.
It's a huge website. I got to do something about the organization of the darn thing.
There's a lot of info. I noticed. I looked at it earlier. There's a lot of there is a massive amount of information. And by the way, to those in the live chat, I put his website address into the description of this video. And as far as his books, all you have to do is search his name on Amazon, Whitley Strieber, and there is so many books. I did want to ask you about some of your later experiences, because another book of yours that I found fascinating was, hold on, I'm going to share it here so people get an idea of this. Because your early experiences seems to be all these typical, what people would call aliens.
Yeah.
But in this book, The Key, A True Encounter, you describe a very human-like figure that came to you. And my take from it is that this person just came to you and started teaching you some of the secrets of the universe.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like at the time. Well, what happened was I was in the Delta Chelsea Hotel in Toronto, which may still be there for all I know, and it was 1998. And I did not know, but it was the last author tour I would ever do in my life. And so I was, I had dinner in the room. They come in late and the restaurant was closed, so I had dinner in the room. And I had closed my eyes, and there came a knock at the door, and I saw that the room service tray was still on the desk, the little desk and so I assumed it was the waiter. And I opened the door, and this man comes in. He's not as tall as I am. I mean, I'm 6'1", and he must have been about 5'8". He was an older man and didn't look at all threatening. In other words, there was no sense of it being like someone trying to muscle their way into my room. But I still, as soon as I realized he wasn't the room service waiter, I only had one thought: get him out of here. Because if I don't get him out of here, I'm going to be talking to this guy at 2:00 in the morning. I had now come to realize it was much later than I thought. And that can't be good, right? Someone comes into your hotel room where, they've had to work to find you, and it's 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah, what are they doing there at that hour,
No
right?
matter
That would
what
be my first thought.
no matter what they say, this is going to be a problem. And he starts to talk. Immediately turns around by the window and starts talking to me. And it's quite interesting, very unexpected things he started to say. And I got interested. I simply got interested, and I asked him questions, and it went off for about 45 minutes or so. And then something happened that had happened before during one of the experiences, which is, and this is the thing that's one of the things that tells you that this stuff is really way, way beyond where we are. It just seems sort of part of normal life when it's happening. And that is that he gave me this glass from the bathroom, one of the hotel glasses, that had a white liquid in it, and asked me to drink it. Now, would you?
That's bizarre. No, I wouldn't do it. I remember this from the book, and I thought, why is he just going, okay, bottoms up and drinking this strange?
Absolutely no way would I do that, but I did it. I didn't even think twice about it because he had this under his control, obviously. So I drank it, and it was very bitter. And that happened once before during one of the close encounter experiences that I had after I wrote Communion. I think I mentioned it in this next book, Transformation. Anyway, I immediately fell asleep. And when I woke up the next morning, the first thing in my mind was call Anne and tell her this happened, because you know yourself very well. You are going to decide it never happened by the end of today, and it is important. I'd taken notes even.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of philosophical. It was like this guy just showed up at your door, and then he dropped all of this philosophical, strange knowledge on you. This esoteric lessons of life and beautiful poetic things,
and the book Superstorm came out of that meeting as much as it came out of anywhere, because he talked about how ice ages end and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, history, philosophy, religion, spirituality.
Right. It was amazing, an amazing conversation. And so anyway, I found out much later what I drank. I know what it is now. was called in and it's hard to find this on the internet, but I found it in a book about classical ancient Greece. It was called the milk of Nepenthe, the milk of the goddess of sleep, and it is an opium tincture where it's
Great.
and
That'll make you fall asleep.
yeah,
Not off.
exactly.
Yeah.
And now if this is also high tech, why are they using as a sleeping something to put you to sleep an opium concoction
That's
that
bizarre.
has been known by mankind for thousands of years, probably to the ancient Egyptians even. See what I mean? Isn't it weird? I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot of things in your books that I go, just to play the devil's advocate. Some people are not really believing of your experiences or whatever, but there's these weird little details or things in some of your books that, I would think that if somebody was fabricating things, that would be out of place. It doesn't make sense that this happened, or
well,
it's
if I was
interesting.
fabricating things, I would make it more believable.
Yes, and also to play the devil's advocate,
you read my
here's
books, and they are so far out there. But
yeah, a little bit.
I am trying as hard as I can to describe these experiences accurately without regard to what happens to me, because you go on Wikipedia or any of those things and you can find more trash talk about me than you can believe, because people don't want this to be like this. If
They don't
it's
accept it. Yeah.
here, they basically want to trade cool video games and go to the other planet on a fancy saucer or something. That's what they really want. But this is bizarre beyond belief. It's incredibly intense. And once it gets into your life, it does not stop. You got a lot of people in different places in the government who believe it's demonic. You got a lot of people who think the abductees are all crazy and that none of this has ever happened. And then I sit here and I can reach up and touch that implant anytime I want to. And not only that, I know how it works and I know how to use it. So, and I use it in my work all the time. So there you have it. Crazy,
Yeah.
strange,
That is crazy and strange.
He has to be a liar. But
again, to be the devil's advocate, one of the other criticisms that I've heard of you, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you about some of this stuff. So
you know how many times I've had this conversation.
I get it, but no, I'm gonna get a little bit personal. But I want you to know, going into this question, I'm on your side. Some people have suggested that you are all about money and you're all in this for money, and that every time you need to write a new book, suddenly you're having new experiences and suddenly there's a new book. So this is all about profiteering and money. But I just wanted to ask you, because you've had some people aren't aware of this, but you've had 2 fiction books that were hugely popular in the form of the Hunger and Wolfen that were turned into Hollywood movies. You've had The Communion that was turned into a Hollywood movie. So yeah. I guess when people say that about you, my mind goes to the fact that you were already a wealthy man. Isn't that fair to say that you were already a wealthy man before all this started?
No.
You had Hollywood movie deals, right?
We went bankrupt in 1998.
Okay.
Because, this criticism is what you've just described is what the general public believes about me. And that was reflected in the decline and eventual destruction of my career as an author. I publish my own books now, not because there's any conspiracy against me, but because publishers can't sell them. They don't sell. And they don't sell because the public believes I'm a liar. And I have not succeeded in breaking through to the general public because there is simply so much resistance to the high strangeness. And I don't blame people for that at all. My books in the early 90s and late 80s from my books made a lot of money. But
Two
then
million. Communion sold 2 million copies. That's a lot of copies of a
yeah, it
book,
did,
right?
and it still sells a few copies every year. But I get about $1,500 a year from it. But I was unable to hold on to that money because it it dried up too suddenly. We had the after, I believe it was the book Majestic, things just cratered and there were no sales. And then the next thing we knew, we lost everything. We lost the cabin. We lost everything. We ended up in a little condo
Oh,
in San Antonio,
sorry to hear that.
my home, which I had hometown, which we had bought for my mother, and she passed away, and we ended up living in it and trying to keep our son in school because he was in a private school, and we didn't want to move him. And so it was really hard. And I made a little bit of money. Then came on Superstorm when it made a movie, and that lasted us for a few years. But it wasn't enough to stave off the bankruptcy, and the loss of the cabin was a terrible blow.
Oh yeah, Mr. Strieber, I have a cabin that I've been building by hand for 3 years now, and it would kill me to lose it.
Yeah,
So
well,
I feel for you, because that
so
becomes like mine has become like a family place, and all these memories there. So yeah, that had to be painful for
I
you.
also
And
had learned techniques of relating to the visitors that made it very easy for them to materialize. And I was really doing something remarkable at that cabin. If I had been able to stay there, I don't know how far I would have been able to go with it, but I was bringing two worlds together in that space, and not just in the cabin, but in the area around it.
surrounding it. Yeah, somebody was asking, does Mr. D.B. Cooper was asking, this is right to what you're talking about now. Do you believe that it was you or the isolated place that led to your contact?
Uh, it's both. It wasn't the isolation; it was the geography. I mean, the geology, excuse me, of the area. The cabin is situated on a seam of iron that runs from runs all the way up the Hudson Valley to Rosendale, New York, and then beyond that to Woodstock. And you can, if you know how, and I can't describe it. It's like riding a bicycle. Why can you balance on a bicycle? The answer is
Yeah, that's an odd thing.
I mean, right?
And you never forget how to do it too. That's
Right.
another odd,
And so I
odd
still
human
learned to
thing.
balance on that bicycle, and I could make a situation where they could kind of walk into our reality, and it pretty easily. And when I say they, I don't know who they are. I don't think of them as aliens, because somehow or another, someone who can suddenly appear in your bedroom out of nowhere doesn't strike me as having come from another planet. They've come from another
Dimension.
relationship to reality, but not necessarily another world. So
John Brisson is here, and he says, Stephen, off topic, but can you please ask Whitley about the Finders cult in Mexico? I'm writing a book on them. God bless.
well, there's a lot of I did a little research into the Finders cult years ago, because I believe I was taken to a place in Mexico, supposedly a school for bright children in Monterrey, when I was about 7, and it was not a good experience. And when I happened upon the Finders cult and saw that the children who were found in the park in Tallahassee, what happened, for those of you who don't know, is they were these sort of feral children were found, noticed by people in this park in Tallahassee, Florida, and the people called the police because they couldn't understand what these dirty little kids were doing wandering around in this park. And the children knew their names, but they didn't seem to know anything else about themselves. But when the police got there and questioned them, they said that they were from they were going to a special school in Mexico for bright children. And this really attracted my attention because I thought to myself, my God, it's real. And it's still going on. And so I did a little bit of more research, but my efforts to find such a place, uh,
so you weren't able to reproduce it somewhere else.
I wasn't able to find any such place.
Yeah, Lord Ludicrous has a great question, actually, that's related to what you're talking about right now. He says, has he spoken to the current owners of the cabin? And if so, do they have any experiences?
No, they don't. And you're not going to. If I'm there for a few days, they're going to have experiences, but not otherwise. You have to be, they don't have the genetic coding or whatever it is that experiences have. They're very sweet people. They're lovely people, in fact, but they've never had anything like this. And
so do you believe some people are predisposed to have these experiences or be more open to them than others?
It's either that they are predisposed to it or they come to it in one way or another. One of my father's brothers was involved in the Roswell incident as an Air Force officer at Wright Field when the debris was brought there. And anyone will tell you in the experiencer groups that this goes down family lines. And for whatever reason, and maybe that's not the reason, I ended up involved somehow when I was a child. And this involvement is, well, I'll give you an idea. If you remember communion, I get very upset when they stick a needle in the side of my head.
Understandable, yeah.
Well, there's a part of the brain called the white matter, which connects two executive function areas called the caudate and the putamen. And the more dense this white matter is, some doctors have found, the more sort of psychic experiences and so forth people have. And so they wanted to study mine, of course, my brain, and see what they could find. And they got an MRI scan of it, and it doesn't show, it shows just normal, except for one thing. All of the wiring between the two brain areas is completely unique in the experience of these doctors. They've never seen anyone wired together like that. And I've often wondered if what went into my head that night changed my brain. And it literally made me able to do this more.
To interface with them. Maybe they gave you some sort of upgrade?
They had seen my interest, and therefore they decided to make it easier for me to interface with them. That's just one theory, but I would love to see more scans of close encounter witnesses, because some of the others have been found to have very, very dense white matter between the two brain areas. And so there's something going on there. Definitely.
That's the thing. That's the part of this kind of phenomenon that fascinates me, when we can show scientifically, like, these people that are having these experiences have marked differences in their neurology than the average person.
It's very exciting. And, we'll eventually find someone who has an MRI from earlier and an MRI from now, who has this unusual brain structure, and we can find out then for sure whether or not it's something that they started with or something that came into them later, if they were altered. And that would be a big plus if we knew that, because then we would also know that they must be, whoever's doing this must be looking for people, perhaps because of DNA signatures of some kind. So
interesting. And I also wanted to ask you, through the lens of time, do you have a better sense of first of all, why are they contacting people, or what is their purpose in contacting people? And also, I had a question from Emmett from UFO Brothers that was already on my list, and he wanted to know what's with the aliens and the dancing. That was a question
And
from
what?
Emmett. What's with the aliens and the dancing? Or was
Dancing.
that, yeah, or was that sort of hyped up in the film? You know, there's a scene where
Oh, that's totally film.
okay, so they
There was
didn't, they
no
weren't dancing with you, and
they
no?
did not dance with me. No
Okay.
way. There was no dancing.
Okay, but
First of all,
the
they were
first part of the question is, do you have a sense of what is the purpose? Like, one of
well,
the things that
it's a huge
that makes me
question.
go, what? Why would you go if they are aliens? Let's say, why would you go light years and then have contact with the intelligent beings on another planet? And it just, what is the purpose of this contact? Did you find any reason, or do you find any, you know, some kind of something that makes sense of why they would be contacting you? Do they want something from you? Do they want to educate you to go educate other people about their existence? What could it be?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think that there is an enormous gulf between us. Enormous. Like one of the officers who was at Wright Field, not my uncle, held one of the bodies, and his description of it was that it was like a gigantic insect, like a big insect. It was very light and not it was not substantial at all. And I assume that they were dissected. I don't think the alien autopsy film reflects. It certainly doesn't reflect what I heard in my family. The descriptions I heard in my family. And I knew nothing about the family connection to it until after I wrote Communion, and my uncle called me down to his a place in Texas and said, "Listen, we need to talk." And he told me what he knew, and General Exon, Art Exon, also, who was his friend, told me a lot, and I based my whole book Majestic on this. So
That's one of the iconic
from
scenes from the movie too,
from
the
the movie, right?
insectoids. Yeah.
Well, see, there's something, and if you read Jacques Vallée's new book, Trinity, it talks about insect-like looking beings, and that is a big meme in the whole Close Encounter experience. It is that there's something about that's there, that's real. So if you look at that, you think to yourself, maybe they're an evolution like ants or bees, and they have a communal mind. But then you get to know them, and they have a tremendous individuality and highly developed emotion. They're very emotionally intense people, and yet they do seem to have a completely communal mind. I mean, it's very strange because you're with these beings who project a real sense of individuality, just like we
But
do.
there's some sort of hive mind above that,
But
right?
but, but beyond that, there's this huge mind, and it we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to communicate very well at all, ever. I don't think, because we're just too different.
Yeah, it's like trying to talk to a roach, right? If we tried to
So yeah,
communicate with
it's
a
like
roach, we
trying to talk to a genius bee or something.
yeah. And I also wanted to ask you about what is your opinion of? It seems to me that your experiences, there's different sort of beings. You've got these sort of midgets with the big heads. They're not the typical gray, but then you also did have the typical uh, gray alien sort of interactions, and others, right? Human-like entities, more
Yeah,
human.
more humanish. Yeah, humanoid. Um, well,
Did you get a sense that this race's purpose is this, and this race was
not at
doing
all.
this, or no?
No, it's not that simple. I mean, if we went to another world, we would have thousands of different purposes, and many of them would be in conflict with each other, just
Sure.
because of the way we are. And that's the same thing here. It's very my sense of the Greys, especially, is that they're quite territorial. Like at the cabin, it's one kind of gestalt to the experience, and here in Santa Monica, it's different. They're different. They have a different approach and an entirely different way of doing things. So they're obviously different. And yet, when I've seen the ones here, which is only a couple of times, very briefly, they do appear to have that same form. But I've also seen these tall blonde people, and they are, none of them. I wouldn't say we could describe any of them as playing what we would think of as with a full deck. And the blonde people are they're just, you're not going to get anywhere trying to understand what they are. And yet at the same time, they can really interface and interact very fully if they want to. But you can't get into them. The Greys are somehow more approachable. I mean, they have a more similar kind of emotional makeup as us. They get mad and they have a sense of humor. And, the blonde people are very strange. They're very beautiful. In fact, give you an idea of how intense it can be. We were at a hotel in San Francisco, me and my son and my wife once, and I was meditating in the living room at probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly this woman was standing in front of me, and I have never experienced such a sense of goodness before. It was unbelievable. It was like, if you can imagine, goodness is a field, not just a state of mind, but a field, like an energy field.
And you felt this coming off of her?
Oh, yeah. And my soul just popped out of my body. And she looked down at my soul, and she was obviously embarrassed that, I felt like an idiot. I was just so abject. I couldn't believe it. The feeling was so intense. And then she disappeared, and my son comes running in out of one of the bedrooms and says, Daddy, there's a big silver UFO outside my window. And so I jump up and I run in, and it's gone, and she's gone. And that's the blondes. That's what they are.
That's bizarre.
Blondes.
Where time is running short, I do appreciate you giving us this time, and I don't want to try to roll over the time that,
No, thank you.
But I do have I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you about this Annelie story, because I covered it from the very beginning, and it sort of came crashing down, and she was involving you, claiming that you were brokering some deal.
Oh no, that was
all of this stuff. Yes. So I just wanted to ask you, what's your take on her? You've interviewed her. You've talked to her.
Show, and obviously you had some trouble. I've had one or two shows where I've blown up on people, and it's not a podcaster's job.
It's not something I was proud of.
I'm not gonna say shame on you, because I've done it myself.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it was a mistake. But you know what? I learned from mistakes. I will never ever again pop off like that on a guest.
Yeah, I know.
I agree. It was just not the right thing to do. It was just a lot. It was a year of this building up in me, and her. I felt that she was manipulating me the whole time, and then the story came crack. Yeah, so
I interviewed her on my show, but I waited until after December the 21st, because I was rather certain nothing would happen. In fact,
me too.
I was absolutely certain nothing would happen. But at the same time, I checked out her curriculum vitae, and it's real. And she has got a very distinguished career in intelligence work.
That's what shocked me and made me interested.
So therefore, something's going on here that is typical of this experience. It doesn't make sense And yet there it is. I mean, here this person with this distinguished career goes out to the desert, blows grass or gets high or doesn't, or whatever happens. She suddenly goes home, jumps in her car, and drives to Washington because she's afraid to fly, and goes and tries to have a press conference on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to announce that she's going to take a group of scientists into a cave in the Mojave Desert to meet aliens. And when I saw that press conference, I thought to myself, there's only one country in the world where this can happen. It's here. This
United
is
States. Yeah.
for sure. And only in America. So I thought, well, I'll get in touch with her. And I eventually did that. And I'm not a, I've been through too much myself to come down on people.
To judge her, yeah.
I understand the people who do. I mean, because, she makes a big claim like that and then it doesn't happen. And of course, people come down on her. But when I interviewed her, I tried to explore what was behind it. What in the world would possess her to do that, even if she was crazy. And I mean, it's certifiably crazy, but she could be. This is not the first choice in terms of announcing my crazy to the world. You might, do something more conventional and less bizarre than that.
Or less dramatic, I thought, right?
But if there is something manipulating her on some level, just maybe that something wants to send a message, to put up a trial balloon with the intelligence community by placing a distinguished intelligence officer in a situation like that. That community could not fail to notice, especially her friends, what she was doing. Absolutely not fail to notice it. And did it, therefore, were they also looking at the minds of these people to see how they would react if there really was going to be a meeting? In other words, was it a trial balloon of some bizarre sort?
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know. I don't know, but I was fascinated by the whole thing. And
well, unfortunately, we finally get to this person, Wayne, whose real name is Brian, and there's no tunnel, there's no corroboration to her story from the other people that were there. I've spoken to him and his wife, and they both just want out of the story. They don't want to, they don't want their lives broadcast on the internet. Yeah.
It's the last thing they want. And but this has happened many times and over the course of this adventure of contact. She's struck me as a very sweet person, and she's got a very good mind. And why this happened to her and she did this, I don't think we'll ever know.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah. There's a lot of people in the live chat that are asking if you're having ongoing, continuing experiences.
Oh, yeah.
I guess we should end it on that, because we all know
now this is my life.
This is just normal for you now? Like, you talk to aliens?
I don't talk to aliens. I don't know who I talk to, but I talk to them a fair amount. I have experiences in this apartment. My friends call this apartment the unquiet flat, because anyone who's in here for any length of time is going to be sniffed out by the visitors for sure, or whatever's there. And I'm used to it. I just live with it. I meditate with them at 3:00 every morning. And 1:00 in the afternoon and 11:00 at night. And if I don't, the 3:00 one is their really important one. And that's the time in one of the yoga. There's a yoga belief that in India, it's called Brahma Muhurta time, the time of about an hour and a half or so before sunrise, when the mind is most open to learning. And I that's the time of day I use the implant. And I've written 3 books and I'm working on a 4th this way. And
do you think the implant gives you some sort of connection to these beings?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not mysterious. It opens up slit that you can see if you look against a white surface in my eye, and you can see words rushing past. And it's been explained to me by some people, not by aliens. It was put in by people, after all. How that works is it can find things in my unconscious and put them into the mid-conscious. In other words, not into consciousness, because that wouldn't work, but just below consciousness, and expand my whole conceptual process tremendously. And
do you
so,
think this is a machine, or is it
it is
some
a machine.
mystical
Yeah.
thing? Or
It's a device. Absolutely, it has a signal. Even the signal's been detected, but unfortunately that part of it is classified, and because I know it's classified, I'm in the legal position of not being able to talk about it. But the thing is
that's
very
crazy. But don't you? I mean, see, the things like when I hear stories like that, and like if you've ever heard the story of the Aurora UFO crash, and there may be an alien body buried right there, that stuff to me is so tantalizing. I want to go get a shovel and prove if that alien is buried there or not.
nobody ever
And in
does.
your case, I'm not going to go get a scalpel and try to cut that thing out of you, but part of me wants to, so that we can examine
I
it,
think
see
you
what
might
it
get
is,
into
what
a
it
lot of
does.
trouble.
No,
First
I
of
would
all,
never do that. But I mean,
no,
that's what I think, though. Like, it's
well,
so
yeah,
tantalizing that you may have the absolute proof of alien visitors or interdimensional
no,
beings
it's
with
not
high
that.
technology sitting
They
right
were,
there in your ear.
but
For
they were
me,
people.
I would want to study that thing
It was put in
and
by
offer that as
people.
proof.
It was put
Put
in
in
by
by people,
people.
maybe like
Yeah,
a My Lab
and they
situation.
not maybe. I'm not sure. They were not people who were living by the same rules we live by, and they were not. I don't think they were some kind of deep state people or anything. And it was many years before I learned how to use it. And I don't want to. It's too. We can talk another time about it in more
Yeah, I'm
detail.
sorry. We're just about out of time here.
It's not an alien implant. It belongs to us. But whether it belongs to the living or the dead or people who live between the worlds, I don't know. But I do know
Fascinating.
this, that it's a valuable tool. It is not a mind control device. My mind's always been completely out of control. That is not changed in any way.
Well, you're an incredibly creative person to have written so many amazing stories. I mean, I grew up with The Hunger and Wolfen. Those were great stories.
Yeah,
Have
well,
you gotten back to writing a lot more fiction, or
I
mostly
wish
are
I
you just
could.
writing?
My
You're just
dream.
writing your experiences, right?
Well, no, I'm not writing about my experiences anymore because there are various reasons that's in the past. I'm actually working now about a book about the character of the phenomenon of the grays and so forth, and I'm going to publish that hopefully in the summer. And I'm going to come out with a audio book of communions in May, and a new edition of it with a new introduction that discusses where I've been since.
Awesome. Like an updated version, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I hope you'll come back here to promote it. I want to thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure for me. I've been connected to you in some weird way my whole life, either through movies I enjoyed or your book. I couldn't put it down when I first got it. I carried it with me in my backpack back and forth to school, and I would read it, and the other kids would borrow it from me. So just a pleasure to have you here. I hope that you will come back again, Mr. Strieber.
The book was there to initiate contact, and it did. It worked very well, despite the fact that the visitors laughed at it and thought it was a bunch of or told me that anyway, they thought it was a bunch of nonsense.
They're book critics. That's interesting.
They're not book critics, they're bastards.
Well, what a way
They
to
don't write reviews is all I can say.
end the interview. So I'm gonna wish you a good evening, and I hope that you don't be a stranger. You're always welcome here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Strieber. Oh, great. So what can I say, friends? Tonight is one of those nights where I got to use this webcam and this microphone as a portal to an amazing and interesting individual. And I'll always remember this because I really did grow up loving that Hunger movie with David Bowie, and the Wolfen movie was one of my favorites growing up. I got the books later. The books are better than the movies, by the way. So what else can I say, friends? Successful evening. I want to thank all of you guys for showing up. I want to thank each and every one of you kind and generous benefactors. And what else can I say? I'm always happy when there's an audience. Glad that you could come here tonight and be a part of mine. Until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambian. Good night, and God bless all of you.